Hello, friends. Wow, live twice in 1 week. It's so good to be with you. Welcome back to a very special live stream. I think this is the only time I've ever done this, something to this effect, where we're going to watch a documentary and we're going to tune in with the producer of that documentary, watching it with us, and then we're going to talk about it. It's so good to be with you. My name is Tim. I'm the creator and facilitator of the New Evangelicals. We are a non-profit digital organization, and we do three things. We hold space for folks who have been marginalized by the evangelical church. We advocate for accountability inside of the church, and we help people like you explore the possibilities of having a better faith that leaves the basement of what I call is evangelical fundamentalism behind, in search of a more robust faith rooted in justice, love, inclusivity, and of course, non-dehumanization. So it is so good to be with you. I'm seeing all the chats. We can put chats in like this. Look, boom. Jenna is super stoked for this one. Me too. So please feel free to load the chat up. Give this video a like. It gets this video out to more people because YouTube looks, this is creator talk, but I'm going to be honest with you because I don't lie. If you like this video a lot, YouTube goes, oh, people like this video. Perhaps we should recommend it to more people. And let me tell you, this documentary we're going to watch, I've already seen it. It is incredibly powerful. It's not one that like you want to watch, but it's one that you have to watch. And so I'm really looking forward to watching it live with you guys. I love doing this stuff. It feels so much better when we're tuned in live in real time watching this. Of course, this will be saved afterwards as well, so folks can rewatch the stream. Let's bring in the producer of this documentary for our daughters. I have the one and only Kristin Du Mez. It is so good to see you, my friend. How are you?
Hey, thanks for having me. It's really good to be here.
Absolutely. You are the author of Jesus in John Wayne, which, I mean, I don't know if like books go viral, but yours did. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's been a thing. It certainly has.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, we've talked about it before on the podcast. I think you were one of my first guests, and we called the episode Holy Balls because that's one of your title chapters.
Oh, one of my favorites. Yeah. I really don't think that chapter title gets the attention that it deserves. So I really
I'm with you.
appreciate that.
I got you covered. It's nice that, when you are a content creator, it's kind of your job to be a little bit irreverent sometimes. So it's nice to be able to pull on those strings, even when we're talking with professionals and academics like yourself. So it's truly great to have you. We're going to start this documentary in just a few minutes. I want to give folks some time to kind of catch up and join us. I'm kind of curious, maybe you could just kind of tee up, first off, the premise of the documentary. It's only about 30 minutes long. And also what led you to put time, energy, perhaps even money into making this documentary?
Yeah, so the documentary is inspired by the last chapter of Jesus and John Wayne, Evangelical Mulligans: A History, the chapter that really dives into the sex abuse scandals throughout evangelicalism. And I came across these, not intending to write a book on sex abuse at all, but just writing a book on evangelical masculinity and militarism intertwined with Christian nationalism. And then I started noticing abuse of power, sexual abuse popping up over and over again. And so I decided to dig deeper, and that's where we have the last chapter. So when we were, I was approached by a filmmaker, Carl Byker, the director of this film, was interested in doing a bigger project on Jesus and John Wayne. And we're still interested in that. That still is on the table. But we were just doing some preliminary interviews, getting some initial footage just to kind of get a sense of things. And we were both so blown away by these initial interviews that we did with some of the women from that chapter that we decided, given this moment in history, we really need to do something first with these stories. We need to platform these women and bring their voices into the mix in this particular historical moment. And once we're past this moment, one way or another, then we'll take a look at the bigger project. So that's how this happened. We were just absolutely stunned by the power of these stories and wanted to bring them to the largest audience possible.
Wow, I love that. Well, I got to say, watching it, I'm someone who, at this point, it's kind of my job to cover some of the bigger stories of church abuse. And most of them I was pretty familiar with, not all of them. But just seeing it put in such a compelling format, like the actual, how you guys packaged it, how you presented it, that's what made it, I think, even more powerful, right? Because it's one thing to hear the story or read about it in an article or see someone's tweet about it. the work of many of those folks is important, including the work that we do. But seeing it put together in a 30-minute documentary where you can see the bigger picture and then also the impact, right? It's just really, really powerful. So I'm really excited to get into this. One thing I want to say, friends, to all of you, and this is, I'm being serious here. All super chats, every dollar that we get from any super chat in this live tonight will be going right to Kristin and her team to help cover the cost for the documentary, to help out with promotion of the documentary. We really believe in this project. We're also going to do any ad revenue we get in the next month that happens post as well. We're going to give to Kristin and to the team to help make more of these, hopefully, and to help cover any costs or promote the movie even more. So I really recommend, and not to sound too churchy, okay, this is not your tithe, but if you would consider being generous by giving a super chat or by watching this a lot and doing some ad revenue, that'd be really helpful. You can find the super chat button somewhere close on your phone screen or on your TV, wherever you want. But super chats are going to go right to Kristin and to the team to make more of these, hopefully, and to also cover the costs that they already incurred and to use that money to do more ad revenue to promote this. And I think once you see this documentary, you're going to understand why. So I want to make that really clear to everyone. All super chats, all ad revenue is going straight to you, Kristin, and the team as a way of us saying thank you and that we believe in your work, hopefully putting some of our money where our mouth is to fund more of these projects. Is there anything you want to add before we get rolling?
I'll just say thank you for that. And I did want to give a shout out to our director, Carl Byker. This was a labor of love. He did this entire project for zero compensation. And so, yes, this is very much a not-for-profit endeavor. And so many people have come alongside in this process. They see it, they watch it, and they just want to help. So thank you to you, Tim, and to all the folks who are here today. It really is a team effort here. And it is honestly such a pride and joy to be able to carry these women's stories forward and to do so as part of a larger community. So thanks so much for that.
Absolutely. All right, friends. Well, buckle up. Usually I would say like get your popcorn out, but this is a very serious topic, but whatever. Get your drink in your hand, sit back, relax, take notes. We'll come back. We'll watch it with you guys live. Here we go. And then we'll talk about it. So without further ado, For Our Daughters.
I was raised to be a wife and a mother one day. So my whole purpose was to become this godly woman and not to serve my own needs or desires.
As a girl growing up in the church through the purity culture, what I really gained from that was that if I was this amazing Christian woman who loved the Lord and was a good person, then the most I could hope for was God was going to bring me this amazing, godly Christian man.
I was raised in the church. So the idea that these men, pastors, watch over your soul, this was the fishbowl I swam in. This was simply all I knew.
But what Kate, Jules, and Krista didn't know was that the men who claimed to be their guides and protectors cared far less about them than about their own power. Their power over women and their power over the country.
How do you make America great again? You make America Christian again.
We get called, well, you're a Christian nationalist. You want the kingdom to be the government. Yes.
The point of Christian nationalism, my goal, is to break American democracy.
I'm going to be a dictator for one day.
We need total dictator Trump. The Constitution is invalid.
Christian nationalists see themselves as entrusted with this duty to take back the country.
God, we didn't come just to go to church. We came to go to war.
Their plan for winning this war is for Christian men to be aggressive, militantly masculine, even violent. And if they win, American women will be required to give them control of their bodies, just like the Christian women who have already been living under their authority.
My dad would say that he is the prophet, priest, and king of the household, And we were taught that men were strong and powerful and protectors, and they had a lot of positive language to describe the patriarchs. And then women had to be the helpers and to submit.
I have 4 people in my life that I dictate the hours in their day. I dictate what time they go to the bathroom, when we eat, what we wear. Those are the people that I have almost limitless authority with.
Anytime I showed a strong individual desire, then that was shut down. So I had to be quiet and weak just to survive. My whole goal in life was to grow up, get married, and have children. And we didn't believe in things like birth control. So the expectation was that we'd have as many children as possible. And our parents would use us to bring about this change in the country. We would make the country a Christian country.
Godly women want to feed their men. Godly women are designed to make the sandwiches. But this is not an absolute law like the one about making babies.
Christians need to be thoughtful about this with our kids. They're all arrows. They're all to be sharp and they're all to do damage to the enemy. But we want our daughters to grow up seeing what they're for.
We're just going to outbreed these people. We are.
There has been a lot of talk about Christian nationalists' drive to take over the country and about their strict view of the roles of women and men. What's been hidden until now is that their views of what men and women should be like in the new America are already triggering one of the most shocking sexual abuse scandals in our history.
When you've created a culture where manhood and womanhood is defined by submission and authority, you have created a culture where authority goes unchecked and easily becomes abuse. And so men think they can get away with abuse because they actually can get away with it.
Andy Savage, my youth pastor, was very gregarious. He was a good-looking guy, super fun. And so when he came to my church, everybody was so excited that this charismatic man was coming to bring more kids to Christ and make the youth group a cool place to be. Many of us in the youth group had gone up to church after school one day to hang out. Ultimately, it was going to be me and Andy there, and I didn't have a ride home. And so I remember calling my mom and asking her, is it okay if Andy brings me home? And she said yes. As we were driving home, Andy passed the turn to my house, and I remember asking him, where are we going? And he said, you'll see. Suddenly, he had turned down a dark dirt road and parked the truck and turned the lights off. And the next thing I knew, he was taking his penis out of his pants. And then he suddenly jumps up and runs out of the truck, and he's screaming, oh my God, what have I done? And he tells me, Jules, you have to take this to the grave with you. So in 2018, I finally got the courage to decide to come forward. And I looked up Andy Savage, who was now one of the leading pastors at a mega church in Tennessee, and I decided to write him an email. And I signed off #MeToo.
2 days later was a Sunday, and the head of the church announces to the congregation that Pastor Savage has something he needs to tell them.
What happened next was so enraging. I wanted the world to see it. That's when the New York Times put the church's own video online.
I regretfully had a sexual incident with a female high school senior in the church.
He tells the world that it had occurred and that he was sorry.
And everybody stands and they give him a standing ovation. And when you see the congregation standing up and applauding an abuser, which happens over and over, it's very emotionally satisfying to accept quote-unquote repentance, to emotionally identify with the abuser, because what it gives you is this very neat, tidy story of restoration, allegedly. Right? It gives you this pretty little package with a bow on top where you can say, look how beautiful it is God redeems. And it costs you nothing. It costs you something to side with the vulnerable and the weak and the oppressed. It costs you nothing to side with the one who's in power.
One of the kickers is that I remember them saying, "We are saddened to see that Miss Woodson has not been on the same path to healing as Andy." Are you kidding me? This didn't affect him 1 ounce. He was celebrated. You don't just move on after trauma. And when society and the church acts like it didn't happen, disposes of the victims, then it's re-traumatizing all over again. We've had the Me Too movement, but we still see the same toxic crap, excuse my language, happening in the church. There has got to be equality. There has got to be women having a voice.
That's the voice of toxic femininity, right? There's toxicity there, but it's a rebellion against the way God made the world. So God made the world in such a way that the husband is the head, the wife is to look up to her husband, calling him Lord.
They are subjugating half the population, the whole female population. To be able to justify that and rationalize it with all earnestness and true belief that this is God's will, that is very, very powerful and extremely destructive. You imagine, I'm this 15-year-old goody two-shoes nerd. I've never held hands with anyone. The pastor, right? This is my pastor. He holds the authority of God. He sexually grooms me. He sexually abused me. I'm sexually assaulted over 30 times as a 16-year-old girl. I told the music minister of the church. He told me I should never again speak of it. The senior pastor told me I should rededicate my life to Christ. The pastor who did it made me kneel in his office while he stood over me, praying out loud, hand on my shoulder, praying for God to cast Satan from me, essentially a sort of exorcism. And I slithered out of there feeling lower than I had ever felt. And then I was made to apologize to his wife. I am the girl who was blamed.
Sexuality really is taught as existing only for men. Women exist as a means to an end, the sexual satisfaction of their husbands, or as a danger to a godly man. And then coupled with that is often a strong teaching that this need that men have, this sexual need that men have, is absolutely irrepressible, right? That it's God-given, and that they must have sexual release. And what that really does is it places the responsibility for sexual purity in every single instance squarely on the shoulders of the woman. If something goes wrong, if a man abuses, if he lusts, if he has sex outside of marriage, right? Well, that's the woman's fault.
And he, oh my, he went on to, a bigger and better job at a more prestigious church. I'm sure he had a higher paycheck. And his whole career, he never faced a bit of consequence. When my own daughter approached the same age I had been, I couldn't live with knowing how things were. So that was the start of it.
This massive institutional enablement of horror must be addressed on an equally massive scale.
Any woman who dares to speak publicly, then they will rain almighty hell on you. Some of the people who vilified me publicly were the highest leaders of the Southern Baptist Convention, the largest Protestant faith group in this country. These are not just, some deranged, isolated people. No, this is part of the culture of what they do to women who speak out.
Why is it that simply raising your voice about the mistreatment of women in the church and about the reality of sexual abuse in the church is enough to try to categorize you as a demonic influence and to silence your voice?
And then, it all built on itself. When I wrote my first op-ed for the Dallas Morning News, it had my email address at the bottom of the op-ed. I was flooded with stories from other people. I got so many emails saying, "You're the first person I've ever told." That was when I thought, oh, this isn't just one bad pastor or even a dozen. This is a lot.
For all of the years that I carried the secret, I thought that I was the only one. I just did not imagine that this was something that happened often. So imagine my surprise when I find Krista Brown speaking out. Right about the time that I was finding my voice and deciding that I couldn't be quiet anymore. My pastor was Jerry Vines. Pastor Vines became a godlike figure. Daryl Gilliard, Dr. Vines saw something in him. Gilliard was a fiery figure. He's on Jerry Falwell's television program and radio program.
Let's welcome back to our pulpit, Daryl Gilliard.
I want to bring a message this morning entitled Peace Amid the Storm.
Daryl Gilliard found me in our youth group. And when Daryl Gilliard came to me and told me he saw something, it was as if the Pope reached down and said, "I see something in you." He basically told my parents even that he wanted to mentor me, that he saw something special in me, which in that world was pride for my parents. What we didn't know is that Daryl had many victims already, had attacked so many other people. One of the nights of the revival, Daryl told me that he needed to speak to me after service. And I asked where. And he asked me to meet at the hotel. He said, "Be in the open," and that's where everything went haywire. He chased me all the way through the hotel because he was right on my heels. By the time we get to the parking lot and I look back and realize he's still coming and nobody's coming with him, and it is in a dark, desolate area of the city. And just like a horror movie, you can't get your keys in your hand to get into the car. And he's on me from behind, and he's on top of me. Like, again, just like a horror movie, you're just trying to get the key in the lock. And animal instincts kick in, my adrenaline is high and I'm strong. And I somehow finally managed to get the key in, and at the same moment reach back and just shove him. I managed enough to get into the car, but he was still coming. I can see him still in my back windshield as he's trying to leap towards the car. But I got away. I got away. And I drove all the way home thinking he's chasing me. My mother was waiting up for me, and she was very angry that I had missed my curfew, and then she saw me, and I just collapsed on the floor. I'd made it safely inside the door and locked the door. My mom decided she was going to call Dr. Vines. That was her first thought. Not call the police. I'm going to call Dr. Vines. Jerry Vines sat while I'm distressed across his desk, having to tell this horrible story. And Jerry Vines looked across the table without absolutely no reaction or no sense of, I can't believe this has happened. There was no sense of fear or worry other than about us telling. And the question was, who else knows? Who else have you told? No one. No one. Just mom. I told my mom. I haven't told anyone else. It's good that you didn't tell anybody. Let's keep it that way. You know, it'd be really embarrassing for you if people knew. It'd be really embarrassing for you if people found out about this. When we left that office that day, we understood that Jerry Vines was calling Paige Patterson and that they were going to move forward in removing him from ministry. Dr. Vines was a very prominent figure, but higher than that was Paige Patterson. I assumed, again, that I was the only one, and I assumed that it would be shocking to both of them, not fully understanding that they already knew.
The church must do the right thing to help Brother Darrell.
Patterson stood in the pulpit and invited Darrell in, and when he came in, you can see this moment of him embracing him like a son. And as they stand there embracing, the audience claps in a standing ovation for the man who just weeks before sexually assaulted me as a teenager.
As to whether or not his total ministry.
But worse, so much worse. Immediately and in that moment, they said they wanted to restore him.
Brother Darrell has asked me to walk with him and others also of his dear friends across this country, including Dr. Falwell, Dr. Vine, in a process of restoration. That's exactly what we intend to do.
If we took Scripture seriously, we would recognize that church leaders are held to a much higher standard. But in reality, we treat them with such a level of deference that there's almost no accountability at all. That's not God. That's not what he's commanded his church to be, and it's certainly not biblical justice.
Finally, years later, he was arrested for crimes against 2 minor girls in his church. So the courage came like a roaring lion, and there was no holding back at that point. I am not going to be quiet again. And so when I called the sex crimes detective, the sex crime detective immediately tells me, it's probably not going to go anywhere. He's too powerful. Her exact words, he's too powerful, and I think these charges will be swept under the rug. You have the Vines and the Patterson, you know, Falwell, all of those voices that don't want this to come out. Again, that lion, I was like, not this time, not this time. And I said, what do we need? What do we need to make this stronger? And she said, we need more victims, and we need victims that can testify, because these are 2 young girls, and they can't probably stand up to the weight of a prosecution and a trial and all of the things. So that's what I set out to do. I wanted to bring awareness to it. I wanted to go public. So I called every news station in our city and said, I have a story to tell, and I don't want to be off camera. I want to be on it. I want to put a face to it, because these victims can't. They're too young. By the end of the case, there are more than 40 known victims of Gilliard when the state attorney closed their files. I reached out to both Vines and Patterson and said, please do the right thing now. You might not have done the right thing for me then, but continually I asked them, step up now. But instead, what I was told by Jerry Vines was, you know, Tiffany, given a little bit of time, these things tend to just go away. They don't lose sleep over it. They don't even bat an eye.
And they may pat themselves on the back and look at themselves and say, well, I never abused anyone. They did. They did by perpetuating this system.
So there is this need to maintain power at all costs. Whatever casualties come are just casualties. It's just part of war. That's their mentality. And they have completely lost their actual role as pastors and shepherds in their power war.
Ezekiel 23:30 said, God looked for a man to stand in the gap, but none was found. God found one in Donald J. Trump.
And we are coming on the air with news about former President Donald Trump, as a jury in New York has found that Trump sexually abused and defamed E. Jean Carroll and awarded her $5 million in damages.
In a unanimous, historic verdict, he's been found guilty of 34 separate charges after he paid off a porn star.
You know, I'm automatically attracted to beautiful. I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. You just kiss. I don't even wait. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
Whatever you want.
Grab them by the pussy. You can do anything.
It may seem surprising that a self-professed moral majority would end up supporting a candidate who has bragged about assaulting women. But if you look inside their own communities, you can see how for decades they have propped up men who have abused power and have excused all kinds of harm, all kinds of abuses for the sake of that power. The ends justifies the means.
I will fight even harder for Christians with 4 more years in the White House. I get in there, you're going to be using that power at a level that you've never used it before.
We wake up tomorrow in a Christian nation. Will women have the right to vote tomorrow if you wave that magic Christian wand?
No.
God doesn't need these people. I mean, let's talk about narcissism. Truly. I mean, for you, these men, to think that they are so important to the mission, to God, to the nation, give me a break.
The last and perhaps the most powerful temptation of Jesus was when he was brought up to a high mountain and the devil said to him, I will give you all the nations of the world if you only bow down to me. And Jesus refused. Now, people today are claiming that the church needs to have the power over other people, which it strikes me as exactly the same temptation that came to Jesus on that mountain. And Jesus said no. He said no because power corrupts. It always corrupts.
Hey, want to talk about the insurrection? Let me tell you something. You ain't seen the insurrection yet. My Bible says that the church of the living God is an institution, that the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And the Bible says that we'll take it by force.
When people talk about turning the U.S. into a Christian nation, it makes me quake to ponder what that would mean for women in this country. Because I have seen what it means for the largest evangelical Protestant faith group in the country, and it is bloody awful. But that is not the country I want.
I feel like Jesus called us to love others. And I think that's what could make America great, is if everyone could come together and realize that we all have differences and we walk different paths, we have different stories, we have different backgrounds, but one common denominator could be that love.
Macho power is not what Jesus calls for. Jesus himself did not operate in that way. that Jesus was gentle. He was humble, particularly in his relationship with women. And that way, he told us men what we are to be like. In fact, it's my conviction that that kind of idea that we need to have more power so that we can have our way, or people will say God's way within society, is the exact opposite of what Christ calls us to do.
And I think what we have to grapple with, again, is that the reality that those of us who are raising our voices are not calling for a departure from Christ, but rather a return to who Christ really is.
Wow, man, doesn't hit any less hard the second time around. Friends, I was debating, do I drop comments in as we're watching? It just didn't feel appropriate, but a lot of you have sent so many comments, and we'll kind of play them. I'll kind of scroll through and play a lot of them. Many of you sent in super chats to support the work that Kristin and the team is doing. So just to reiterate two really quick things. Number one, the reason why YouTube creators ask you to like their videos is that way YouTube's algorithm spreads it. I'm asking you to do that to this video so more people see this video, because obviously that documentary must be seen. So there's about 200 people watching this stream. Please take a second, hit that like button so YouTube sees it. It costs you nothing to do. It only helps get the word out so people can see this documentary at no cost, by the way. I mean, Kristin and the team could have put it behind a paywall. They could have set it up any kind of way, and they chose not to. And like I said many times now throughout the stream, any super chats or any ad revenue from this video will be going straight to Kristin and Jesus and John Wayne Productions to help cover any costs or help promote it, because this is a really powerful documentary. I mean, Kristin, first off, hats off to you. You're an academic, you're a scholar on several issues. You are an author that went viral with an amazing book, and now you just helped produce an amazing docu short that has over 110,000 views. I think 114,000 as of like a couple minutes ago on YouTube. So, I mean, just job well done. I know that the family that you have has probably felt the impact of just what this has cost you. So thank you to all of them, and thanks for the work that you're doing. It means a lot. I wanted to ask you a few kind of quick questions. It's not every day you get to talk to the producer right after such an amazing documentary. One of the things that I always struggle with is, I'm tapped into the Twitterverse, unfortunately, still, and I hear people who are always talking about how we have to watch out for the sexualization of children and how there's a groomer epidemic happening in public schools. And these are the same people that, I mean like directly just flat out ignore story after story after story of high profile, of mid profile, of low profile pastors that are consistently found with stories like this, and survivors who were gaslit and ignored. I mean, maybe most recently, one of the most notable ones, Robert Morris, right? I mean, hid in the mid 80s that when he was in his 20s, he molested a 12-year-old, right? And
I believe he's actually in that picture, by the way, with his hand on Trump.
I believe he is, because he was part of Trump's faith advisory panel, or whatever, faith council.
Yep, he's in the film, even though that was before we made the film, that part before.
Oh my goodness, right.
So there they are. Yep, same guys.
Jeez, same guys. Can you help us better understand this disconnect that we all see between the claims of people in this world and what they're saying versus their inability or just flat out refusal to actually hold their own accountable and advocate for the people and the children, mainly women and many others, who were groomed and sexualized at a very young age by pastors?
I mean, it's shocking, right? Some of us who come from inside, conservative Christian spaces, we actually believed some of this stuff about, that sexual purity was important, and that actually people were committed to that, and that, truth was important, and that there were good guys and bad guys. And then if people do things that are bad, we call that sin, and then you call that out, and that's not good, and it's actually evil. And so it's startling to see over and over again how when it comes to the sexual abuse of women and children, I mean, can you think of a greater violation of, they're all about God's law and God's will and family values and, moral values. What else could you think of that could be more violating? And then they're totally cool with it. And here's the thing, like it's a pattern. I first came across some of these stories researching Jesus and John Wayne, and then I came across more and more. At first I thought, oh, this is the outlier, right? Here's another outlier.
Yes.
They can't really be saying these things and doing these things and over again. And that's where I just ended up throwing them into this last chapter of the book, because we had to see them. We had to look at them. Yeah. And we had to see how this was part of the system. Now, why? How? Like, digging underneath, I honestly don't think we fully understand what's going on. I think that there's more digging to be done. But what I can say is it is about power. And it's about more than power. It's about their view of women as less than fully human, as subordinate, and as children, their view of masculine power, of this patriarchal authority. Everything centers around that. And it still is stunning to me, though. It is stunning that this is so pervasive. And what I loved in these stories is how you can really see the texture of what it is like to be a girl inside these spaces. Even when the worst thing happens, that's where you can see it most plainly, how little you're valued.
Yeah. And listen, that you could have picked from dozens, probably hundreds of stories, the IFB, IHOP. I mean, this is not in like a particular strand of evangelicalism, right? I mean, and listen, let's be clear. Abuse can happen anywhere, in any system, wherever humans are present, right? Like, this is not something where it's like only happening here. But as Christians and as people who, in my case, were built by the evangelical church, this is coming from inside the house, right? And so, to your point that you made, listen, when I first started this work, the big initial scandal was Ravi Zacharias. About 3.5 years ago now, right? And I was still new. I'm still learning. I'm still I'm always learning, but I'm trying to figure out, get my lay of the land. And I'm like, wow, this is crazy. Who knew? And it was just story after story. I mean, it's been a flood since I've started this work daily of the same patterns, right? And the same setup where it's like, maybe someone comes forward, she's disparaged. Oh, it's a rumor. Oh, we're going to fight that. Turns out not only was that person saying the truth, but there was a line of bodies behind the rest of that bus, of that organization. And you're right. I share, I told myself I'm going to temper myself on this live because you're here and I respect you. I don't want people to not listen to this because of my, choice words. It makes my blood boil. I want to just scream from the rooftops, what are we doing? How did we get to a point where people will really, with a straight face, say, we are arbiters of God's truth and God's order. And this order means that if women are sexually abused, well, people, but usually this is targeted towards women, are sexually abused, we have to protect the man who did that because he's a man of God. And we have to disparage or victim blame the woman. I cannot think of a more ass-backwards approach, especially from people who claim to be following the risen Christ.
Right. Over and over and over again. And there's the perpetrators, and then there's the everybody else who goes along with it. And I mean, this film is about women and girls. but we had actually interviewed a male survivor as well, and it was too much to fit those dynamics and that angle into a 30-minute film. But I do want to draw attention to that as well. This is not just to women about women and girls. The dynamics are slightly different in those cases, but the response is very similar. Always cover it up, and not just cover it up like, oh, we make it go away, but then affirm the man. Promote him into another church. Pass him along. It's not like you make him quietly go away and you say never do that again. It's not even that, right? And I will say that yes, we in Jesus and John Wayne, the chapter on abuse has a number of different. So we have SBCM, we have Fundamental Baptist, we have across the board homeschool spaces, and so on and so forth. For this film, we discussed, do we go in the Gothard direction? Do we go, there's survivors across the spectrum. We ended up going with, this was important to me, to go with some of the most prominent survivors who have already been out in this space, who know exactly what will be coming at them for lending their voices to this project. I did not want to take somebody from relative obscurity and then put them into the space, because you've seen what happens. You've seen what happens, and it's not just that prominent figures don't or that they ignore this, because they do. They won't even speak about it. I mean, try to get some. I think you've been trying to do this, or some folks are try to get them to talk about Paul Pressler. Try to get them to talk about these guys in their own midst. Total silence.
You know what I've noticed? And by the way, someone did ask actually in the chat, they said, have any of the boys, Joel Webbin, Doug Wilson, said anything about the doc? I'm assuming no, or they've only pushed back. That's my guess.
I mean, I have a lot of people muted, so it could be that some people are saying some things, but not that I've seen yet.
That's for your own sanity. One thing I would say that's even more interesting is there's accounts like one's called Protestia. They're more in the reform kind of camp. They have no problem calling out whenever the charismatic people are found doing this stuff, right? Then they're the same ones who will defend John MacArthur, who protected not one but two different men who were on his staff who molested their own children, right? I mean, like there are, and this is not hearsay, friends. There's email receipts. In one case, one was charged and put in prison. Yet they won't say anything about that. But hey, look what happened to Robert Morris. Wow, that's crazy. It's so corrupt, and it's like, wow, fascinating to observe.
Yep. Oh, John MacArthur, absolutely. Much more can be said on that front. And then it's not just that they're ignoring or pointing outside the camp. They're also attacking the survivors themselves and the survivors' allies. And you see this all the time out there. And it is absolutely vicious. It is twisted. And you know who I'm talking about. And, to see this, that's one of the real motivations here. Just seeing that relentless attack. Attempts at character assassination, attempts at smearing and discrediting. And I just wanted to say no. Rather than trying to fend off this attack and that attack and this attack where you will never win that game, I just wanted to say, listen, pay attention here. Oh, and by the way, all of this is carefully vetted. All of this is true. It's passed through legal review, unlike some of the critics' materials, right? Where they just make stuff up and somehow get to publish things like that, right? This is true. And I just wanted it to be out in public for everybody to deal with, everybody to reckon with.
Well, one thing I've learned talking to dozens of amazing scholars like yourself is that you guys don't put things out publicly without having the receipts, So you're not one just to say, I think this is true. So, for example, some people think that the government is controlling hurricanes. And they'll just say it, right? But you're a little more measured before you say stuff that might be a little controversial. You don't have the data behind it, So
you have no idea the vetting. I mean, even the last Jesus and John Wayne too went through thorough legal review. The last chapter of it, which is the chapter that inspired this film, right? As soon as you get into allegations of sex abuse, right?
Yes.
You can be sued for this. So we went through that with a fine-tooth comb. We being my publisher's lawyer and I. 3 times through every sentence, every footnote, everything is carefully vetted, right? And that's what you've got to do. And that's a responsible way to do this. But, so this isn't he said, she said at all.
Right.
This is just true.
Yeah. And, and honestly, I think that it's very fascinating, and I want to respect your time. We got about 10 minutes left here. And again, Kristin, thank you for taking time to spend the evening with the TNE community and watching your own documentary with us. It means a lot to have you. I know that you're really in demand, so it's truly an honor. It is interesting. I was reading Scott Coley's book, Ministers of Propaganda. I cite this now. It's one of my favorite books. It's so helpful for folks like me who are trying to put language to what I'm witnessing. And he makes a point that I got to say, I felt very proud of myself because I made this point myself before I read this. So it wasn't just his idea. But I've said, it feels like in this world of this like evangelical thing, they claim to be standing on objective truth, but they're actually quite morally relativistic. Like their morals are always shifting to what's appropriate and what's not, and when it's okay and when it's not. And and I think that's why a lot of people who quote unquote deconstruct or that they end up leaving those spaces actually find so much solace in the work of folks like yourself, because you're giving us a grounding that has receipts, that has data, because we believe in truth in some form, right? I do think that objective truth exists. I do think that assaulting women is always wrong, no matter who's doing it. I don't care if they're on my team or not. It's bad, period, right? And someone doesn't get a pass because I think they're a person of God. And so I think that could be why a lot of people have left those spaces, because contrary to what they say, it really does feel like almost every accusation is a confession. It kind of feels like that when it comes to this idea of truth and objective truth and God's law, etc.
Oh, totally feels that way. And yeah, I'm a fan of Scott Coley's work too, the book and his Twitter feed. And and if you're in that Twitter space, right, you've seen this over and over again, that there is no truth. There is no truth. Truth is whatever serves their ends. And I've seen that just a couple of weeks ago, maybe 2-3 weeks ago. I saw a comment. I can't remember where. I was getting attacked for something. I can't remember what it was that week. And somebody came in to defend me and said, "That's a lie. That's absolutely untrue what you're saying about her." And the person responded by saying, essentially, she's the enemy. We can say whatever we want about her and do whatever we want to her.
Yes.
And I just thought that's refreshing. I mean, chilling, but also refreshing, because
it was Josh Dawes.
I knew this. This is how I feel when when these guys come at me. Like literally, they can say and do whatever they want because it serves their greater interests, and that's the basis of their moral framework. Whatever serves their own interests in that moment.
I'm literally trying to pull up the tweet. I know exactly which one you're talking about. We covered it on the recap a few weeks ago. It was Josh Dawes. Yeah, he runs this thing called he's the host of the Great Awakening podcast. That's the name of it. And he said that's exactly what he said. It was a couple of weeks ago, but he essentially said, "Hey, it's okay to lie if it serves the ultimate good that we think is good." That was essentially the whole point. And it's like, you know what? Thank you for saying it out loud, because it reminds me why I had to leave that space behind, right? Like, you know what? If that's a value for you, even though my tradition ironically told me that lying is a sin, if that is now embraced, if it serves your greater good, my value is at odds with that. And I have to find a better path forward in whatever this Jesus thing I'm trying to be a part of actually is, because that's unsustainable for me. And then I think when you couple that with the work of folks like yourself, historians and others who can kind of place where this ideology comes from, what happens when the church swallows it wholesale, you start going, oh, we're actually on a pretty dangerous path here that can lead to a pretty poor outcome for a lot of our neighbors, especially the ones that are in the crosshairs of such an ideology.
Absolutely. We did not shy away from the political framing in this film. And I was very clear with participants up front, hey, if this is what we're thinking of doing. And so if you're not comfortable with that, and all of them were very comfortable with that. And, because we see, and it's not just on the one hand, we've got this parallel. We've got this parallel of this is an abuse of power, right? This is this kind of ruthless pursuit of power, and ends justifies the means. So you've got that parallel in both situations, but it goes much deeper than that.
Yep.
These are the very men, the men who get little starring roles or cameos in this film. They are at the front end of this Christian nationalist agenda right now. I mean, Mother Jones just last week had this really great piece out. I was so grateful for it because it's like the very people in my film that other people might not, know about if you're not, living in these spaces. Joel
Right.
Webben, for example,
Yes.
and even
Yes.
Doug Wilson, right? These kinds of guys. Laying it all out, their connections, Stephen Wolf, we have his book in there, their connections to Project 2025, to former Trump
That's right.
administration, the future Trump administration, Lord help us, right? Like, these are the guys we're talking about, not to mention Paige Patterson, Jerry Vines, these guys from the conservative takeover 1.0. And that was the Christian nationalists, essentially uprising of what we call the Christian right.
Yep.
These are the guys. If you saw Paul Pressler on there, his label was actually Council for National Policy.
Right.
That's what we're talking about. These guys have set their sights on Christianizing America, taking control of the country for a very long time, and right now they're poised to do so, the very guys in this video, and we see how they operate. And as Krista says, are these the guys that you want taking control of this country?
Right.
This is what it looks like.
100%. Yes, that video, I think I sent it to you. I told you I was collaborating with them on that video. It's called The Theo Bros. It's actually on our feed along with Mother Jones. It's a great 5-minute video, and it comes from an article. Her name is Kira. I don't know her last name. She's the journalist on this. And she wrote, and I that's why I sent it to you. I said, look, they're talking about the names that we know that no one else does. Joel Webben, Doug Wilson. Yes, thank you.
So
and
proud.
I agree with you, Kristin. The reason why I get so fired up over this is because I really feel like that a lot of mainstream media sources who cover Christian nationalism still don't either they know and don't want to rock the boat, or they just don't understand the connection between people in this documentary and what they're pulling behind the scenes. To give the audience one easy example, Doug Wilson was featured in this documentary. Now, Doug Wilson, there's a lot we could say about him, like how he wrote a book with a white supremacist back in the early 2000s that kind of protected slavery or defended slavery, how he married off a known pedophile to a woman in his church who actually tragically was found guilty of SAing his own infant at one point. Like, it got really bad. Doug Wilson is deeply problematic on a litany of issues, not just his idea of call me Lord, right? Okay, so Doug Wilson, the slavery apologist who has this litany of stuff behind him, recently graced the stage over at Turning Point USA's, which is a very mainstream right-wing organization. They do $80 million in funding a year. This is not fringe, okay? Charlie Kirk spoke at the RNC convention. Mitt Romney did not. Think about that. Charlie Kirk started TPUSA. TPUSA Faith is their faith arm. So guess who graced this stage this summer? Alongside Ali Stuckey and Megan Basham and others. Doug Wilson. Okay,
Yep.
Doug Wilson. So what you
was
saw
on Tucker Carlson, right? He
Yes.
was also on Tucker Carlson, right? They're making it to the big time.
They're making it to the big time. And I take the time to tell people this intentionally so you understand why we're freaking out about people that you might never have heard of, thinking they're just fringe. And we're trying to tell you, no, they are not fringe. They are shaping the future of the RNC, which is being more and more taken over by this far-right agenda, and they're bringing with it a patriarchal view that God, the creator of all things, with all the power, just so happened to give those men the power to rule over everyone else, especially women and folks who do not conform to heteronormative, etc., racial identities, and so on and so forth. That's why this matters. You have to know that. Because then when people say, we think that democracy could be really at risk with Project 2025 and the people behind a potential administration of a certain president, we're not lying to you, right? We're trying to give you the receipts of like, look, it's not about being partisan. It's not about because I'm a sycophant for the Democratic Party. Of course I'm not, okay? Of course not. We're just trying to warn you of what is actually coming behind the architects of some of these ideas that have found a home in a certain political party in 2024. And we, as Christians, have to be the sounding alarm. I just feel the canary in the coal mine. We have to be that.
Amen.
Sorry for the rant. Sorry for the rant.
No,
I had to say it.
amen. I mean, well, and you and I, like, we see these things, we watch these things, we've been tracking these things for years. And inside a lot of evangelical spaces too, evangelical leaders, a lot of evangelical scholars are not tracking this because they're still 10, 20 years behind in terms of where they think the center of evangelical power is. They're still thinking of, oh, isn't that Fuller Seminary? And not the Fuller Seminary that led to the New Apostolic Reformation. They're thinking the Rich Mao Fuller Seminary. They're not thinking the, Wheaton College that led to Bill Gothard and his types. They're thinking, the more respectable Mark Knoll types, right? They're just, and what they've missed is, this power grab inside evangelicalism. You've always had this strand, but they have never had this much power. And they have the mainstream evangelical organizations, institutions like Christianity Today, on their back on their heels because, again, this kind of power grab for control of evangelicalism. You have the same power grab going on within the SBC. Not that there is a liberal to be found within the SBC, but you've got the right-wing flank, right? CBN founders trying to take over the denomination and coming very close. All of that is part of this larger picture. And these are the networks that we now see coming together on the right within evangelicalism and then extending out beyond evangelicalism. And right now they're poised to take over the country. They really are. And, that's we're a few weeks away from November 5 right now.
Yeah, I completely agree. My last kind of just maybe thing for folks to consider as, again, another receipt for what we're saying. Keep in mind that in the SBC, the largest evangelical, for lack of a better word, denomination, it's not exactly, but it's close enough. Yeah, right. Don't forget that they kicked out Rick Warren's megachurch, like by 80% vote, not for hiding sexual abuse, not for rampant sexual abuse, not for anything like that. They kicked that church out for having a woman pastor, and they have not kicked out many churches that have been found to have pastors hiding or committing sexual abuse. And there is a part of the SBC that believes that there is a leftward liberal drift in the SBC. The same people who also helped kick out Rick Warren for ordaining a woman. So again, we're not here to give you hyperbole. We're not trying to sound like talk radio hosts, like, oh, the sky is falling, when it's not. I know we sound intense, but we have the receipts. Kristin has the receipts in her book, Jesus and John Wayne. You just watched this documentary. These are things that are happening in reality. And I believe as Christians, we have an obligation to do our part, as Paul says in 1 Corinthians 5, not to worry about what the world is doing, but to hold those in the church accountable. There's, I would argue, dare I use the phrase, a biblical mandate, term used lightly, but it's there, I think, for Christians to be very loud when our own tradition is going haywire and doing things that are actually hurting so many people with no sense of conviction, of accountability, or repentance. So that's my last thought on that. Kristin, I'll give you the final word if there's anything to add, and then we'll wrap it up.
Oh my gosh. Just thank you for your voice. Thank you for platforming the voices of these women. And I'll just say, maybe close with that thought of we need to stick together. We need to kind of we need to remind each other of our own sanity here, and remind each other of what is right and what is evil and what is truth here. And the pastor at the very end of the documentary, he's actually my own pastor. And I had him in there because he says beautiful things all the time, but also this is the Christianity I was taught. He was my pastor 20 some years ago, and now he's interim pastor in my home church again. Right. This is the Christianity that many of us knew. Many of us know, many of us are looking for. And this is the faith tradition that helps us see just how distorted, just how corrupted all of this other stuff is. And so if you find yourself in that space, or if you find yourself wondering what the heck happened to, your own church or to the people there's a kind of groundedness here that it's not you, right? It's them.
Yeah, I love that. Kristin Du Mez, truly a pleasure to have you on the podcast, in the show. thank you for the work you're doing. Like I said, everyone, all super chats, all ad revenue for the next month will be going directly to her and her production company to kind of cover the cost, hopefully to use that to promote the movie more and more. Great work. Stay on until after I end the live, and we'll wrap up behind the scenes. But again, thank you so much for coming on. It means the world. Friends, there you go. I mean, powerful stuff. I really want to echo what Kristin said. I know that this is discouraging. Okay, I know if you follow our work, you see a lot of the stuff that's here in documentaries like this. And I also hope that with all of our content, we try to also demonstrate what it looks like to find a better path forward in our faith. Your only options are not no faith at all or Christian nationalism. There is a whole house of Christian thought, beautiful, liberative, thought of taking the words of Jesus literally, not trying to explain away why taking care of the sick is Marxism and socialism. So please, by all means, I implore you, if you're looking for more resources, check out our podcast, check out our YouTube, check out our Instagram. We try to platform as many voices as possible, like Kristin's and many other academics and scholars and theologians and just people who are at the forefront of this stuff. And we really believe in the power of social media and that it's needed now more than ever to disseminate an army of people who are advocating for a better path forward and giving folks like you permission to believe that you don't have to choose between loving your neighbors or loving God. But maybe, just maybe, how we love our neighbors is how we demonstrate our love for God. I am so grateful to have you here. Thank you for being here. It means the world. Truly, we're going to keep this stream up so you can rewatch it, share it with a friend. Have a great night. Talk to you all later on. See ya.